Hello and welcome back to the Outdoor Minimalist podcast. I'm your host, Meg Carney, and I'm an outdoor and environmental writer and author of the book, Outdoor Minimalist, Waste Less Hiking, Camping, and Backpacking. Follow the link in the description to pre-order a copy of the book so you'll be the first to receive it on the release date of September 1st, 2022. The Outdoor Minimalist podcast has a goal to give listeners actionable ways to waste less hiking, camping, backpacking, and more during every step of the process. Your impact outdoors starts long before you hit the trail and goes beyond leave no trace ethics. You'll learn how to identify sustainable outdoor brands, how to ask hard questions regarding sustainability, and begin to shift and evolve your mindset to integrate minimalism into all of your outdoor pursuits. Is a zero-waste backpacking trip possible? What about a zero-waste thru-hike? Well, you're about to find out. In episode 37 of the Outdoor Minimalist podcast, we get to hear tips on how to have a low-waste thru-hike from someone who has actually done it. Lucía Valencia. Lucia, aka Echo, is a hiker from Mexico who in 2021 set out to complete a zero-waste thru-hike of the Pacific Crest Trail. Her love for being outdoors has made her develop a close and respectful relationship with nature, and she wishes to share and inspire others to do the same. Adventuring plans in your calendar? Remember to grab your Lava Linens travel towel on your way out the door. Founded by a mother-daughter team, Lava Linens crafts durable, luxurious travel towels for a more sustainable and better performing alternative to microfiber and cotton towels. Powered by flax and hemp, they're designed to be by your side for years to come. Use the code Outdoor Minimalist for 15% off your next order. Thanks for joining me today, Anna. I am intrigued to learn about how you manage a thru-hike with minimal waste. But before we get to that topic, can you tell us more about how you first got involved in outdoor recreation and how it fits into your life today?
Hi, Meg. So I started getting involved in outdoor recreation when I was really young. My family would take my brother and I camping and hiking very often. Our holidays used to be camping somewhere in Mexico, and they really wanted us to know Mexico through nature. So I think that made me feel really connected to my environment from a really young age. My dad and I would hike together often as I was growing up, and we would go up the Vic volcanoes here in Mexico. And he taught me how to enjoy hiking big mountains. And ever since I've been hooked, I really enjoy being outside. I do a lot of different activities. I hike, I swim, whatever keeps me outside, I really enjoy. And nowadays, I work in things that keep me outside a lot. So I work as a camping guide and as a hiking guide on the weekends. And on my day-to-day, I work on sports-related events, and I try to do the environmental impact of those events. So my life is kind of revolving around the outdoors nowadays.
That's awesome. I feel like a lot of people that I talk to, they kind of had that early introduction to outdoor sports.
Yeah.
And are you currently based in Mexico as well?
I am, yeah. I was born and raised in Mexico. I was born in Mexico City. I have lived there most of my life. Right now, I'm not there, but Mexico is my base, yeah.
With your dad, is that when you first got involved in backpacking?
Yes, we would hike together bigger mountains. So 14ers, 15ers, 16ers. We have big volcanoes around Mexico City. So he got me into that when I was about 13 years old. That was the first time I went up a big, I think it's a 17,000 feet volcano really close to Mexico City. And he really helped me to find my own rhythm, find my own pace, and enjoy the mountain for what it is. Because when I first got there, I was out of breath, I was tired, I wanted to quit, and he kind of held my hand the whole way through, and he would wait for me and encourage me. And that's how I got involved into backpacking. We also did a trip together to the Wind River Range in Wyoming, and we did a 5-day trip there that we really enjoyed. But other than that, we hadn't really overnight backpacked together. We just do day trips around Mexico.
So then what inspired you to want to do a thru-hike or a long distance backpack?
I tend to really enjoy doing long distance things in general. I'm not like a sprinter. I like to take my time and find my pace and find my breathing and my rhythm. When I learned about the trail back in 2015, I watched the movie Wild, like many people did, and I just knew that it was something that I would really enjoy doing. And ever since, it just stuck in my head. And every year I was telling everyone, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. I also really enjoy swimming in the ocean and swimming for longer distances. And I find that doing longer hikes or hiking up a bigger mountain, it's things that make you be really in the moment because your goal is very far away. So you just have to find your pace and it kind of becomes like a meditation. So I really enjoy that feeling. And I knew that Thru-Hiking is something that would give me that feeling. So I decided to do it finally in 2021. And I just dropped everything and I went.
That's awesome. Yeah, I feel like some people are really either into endurance or long distance things, or they're into the shorter, faster paced trips. And I also am more of the slower pace, kind of enjoy as I go. And the Pacific Crest Trail is the trail that you're talking about, right?
Yes, I decided to hike the PCT in 2021, and that's what I did in April.
Is that the first Thru-Hike that you've ever done?
Yes, it is. It's the longest hike I've ever done. Other than that, it was that 5-day trip in Wyoming, but it wasn't 0 to nothing, but I didn't have a lot of experience backpacking or even like ultralight backpacking, even less so.
That's awesome. You're definitely not the first person to tell me that they hiked the PCT and say they didn't really have backpacking experience. And I just think that that's amazing. Do you have other longer hikes that you are planning now that you've done one?
I would want to do a long hike. The New Zealand hike really appeals to me, or a hike in Japan, the 88 Temple Trail. But I haven't done any other longer hikes since I left the PCT.
Well, that was somewhat recent that you left the PCT.
Yeah, true.
So how long did that hike take you?
The PCT took me 5.5 months. So I left the southern terminus on April 18th, 2021, and I reached Canada on October 3rd.
Nice. So I'm going to switch gears slightly here and talk a little bit about things like zero waste and low waste, because I'm curious if before you hiked the PCT, these were interests in your life. So were you already pursuing kind of a zero waste or low waste lifestyle?
Yes, I was. So because I've felt so connected to my environment from a very young age, that's what kind of took me to living a zero waste lifestyle. When I was a teenager, I started falling for environmental causes. I started reading more about our impact as human beings on the planet, and especially how we impact the species that we share the planet with. So first I was reading about unsustainable tropical palm oil production and tried to avoid that. And then I became a vegetarian, and then I became a vegan. And then I read about this movement called Plastic Free July, which is an international movement where you avoid plastic for a whole month. That's the challenge. So I did that in 2018 and I just stuck to it. I saw that it was doable and that I liked living in such a way. Just so that you know, a zero waste lifestyle the goal is to reduce what you throw away into landfills as much as you can. And instead you try to reincorporate any byproducts of what you consume. Not only do you reduce, reuse, and recycle, but you rethink your options, you refuse a lot of things, you repair what you can. And I started living that way 3 years before heading to the trail. So when I decided to hit the trail, I kind of knew that I wanted to do it without producing waste.
Yeah, I was going to ask you how you define zero waste, so thank you.
Yeah.
Before I get to the next question that's on the list, I am also curious, how did you find yourself integrating those zero waste things into your life?
So I started small. First, it was the typical avoiding straws and asking for no straw when you go out, and then avoiding single-use plastics such as plastic bags at the grocery store. And that took me to always carrying my own bags, like my own mesh bags when I would go grocery shopping. Instead of using plastic water bottles, I would always take my reusable bottle. It was kind of like a step-by-step process, like a domino effect. It wasn't that one day I just decided to stop using plastics, because that's impossible. but it was slowly getting there and carrying my own cutlery and then carrying my own container so that I could go, if I wanted to order takeaway somewhere, I could use my own container, and just small changes here and there. I started composting my organic leftovers, and then I started buying in bulk. It was like a 3-year and a multi-year process that I'm still working on. It wasn't perfect from the get-go. Like setting out to perfection is just very unsustainable. So I started small, but I just kept going every year.
Do you think that's why it was maybe a little easier to integrate that into backpacking because it was already a part of your life?
Yes, very much so. Looking back, I don't think I could have thru-hiked with waste just because how deeply I feel about these issues. They really, really move me to the core. Like the way that we are treating our environment makes me really sad. So that's why I do these things, because I want to do as much as possible with the power that I have as an individual, because I know that it can generate impact, and through example, I can impact others. That's why I decided to live the way I do. And that's why I decided to hike the trail the way I did. I don't see myself hiking it any other way.
Okay, so then jumping to your actual waste-free PCT hike, where were areas that you did end up having to create waste? And then this is going to be kind of a 2-part question, is what areas did you notice other people creating the most waste in their backpacking experience?
Okay, so where I generated waste was, first of all, my flight. I had to fly there. I mean, there's emissions related to that. I had to fly to the southern terminus because I was living near Mexico City. The biggest waste I generated, though, throughout my hike was shoes and fuel canisters and shipping. So through a trail that is as long as a PCT, 2,600 miles, I had to use 5 pairs of shoes. And I wasn't able to recycle any of those shoes. And they're so worn down that I didn't really feel comfortable with giving them back to REI and having them put them up for sale. So even I would go into the REIs and ask if they had any recycling programs, but they always said no. So I had to leave them in hiker boxes in the towns that I would stop at. And I don't really know what would happen to the shoes. Probably they would end up in landfill. Before hitting the trail, I found a brand of shoes that makes shoes with recycled materials, and they plant a tree every pair that you buy. And I was planning on wearing those, but when I tried them out on my practice hikes, they didn't really work for me. So I had to go for different brands that are not as sustainable. And I didn't really find any way of reincorporating them into the production system. And also fuel canisters. I had to buy different fuel canisters. Throughout my hike, I changed into getting a fuel transfer device. So that helped me reduce the amount of waste produced from fuel canisters. But still, there were canisters that I had to leave in hiker boxes because they were maybe half empty, and I tried to refill mine. But fuel canisters are also something that's very hard to recycle. So that was also waste that I generated. And shipping as well. I had to ship my own food because I bought everything in bulk. So a friend of mine helped me ship boxes along the trail. And the boxes that I used, we would cover them in paper tape. So we didn't use any plastic stickers or any plastic tape. And I would take away all the tape that the post offices put on the boxes, and I would throw that out. And then I would make sure that the boxes that I did use got recycled. So at the post offices, they have recycling bins. So I would put them there and I wouldn't just throw them out. And also painkillers. Painkillers is something that I couldn't avoid generating waste with because there's no bulk ibuprofen anywhere. So I did have to buy 2 bottles of ibuprofen that come in plastic. And that plastic is recyclable, but along the towns that I went through, I didn't find any bins that would recycle the plastic that comes in the ibuprofen. So yeah, that's it. That's the waste I generated along my hike. Sometimes other hikers would give me food, like they would give me snacks, or if they had any leftover granola bars or cookies or something that came packaged in plastic, they would offer it to me. And even though I didn't buy it, I would take it. Because as a hiker, you're always hungry. So I would take it, and I did have to throw that food wrapping out. And that's where I found most hikers generate the most waste throughout a thru-hike is food packaging. food packaging is an insane amount of waste worldwide, not only in Thru-Hikes. It's like the largest market of plastics today is packaging materials. And that accounts for nearly half of all the plastic waste that is generated globally. Most of it will never get recycled. So that's where I found that most hikers generated waste. And that's why I decided to do a zero waste Thru-Hike, because when I started researching on how to do the trail, I started getting into the logistics of what gear I need, what food I need. And all I saw was food packaging, and plastic everywhere. And that's when I kind of panicked and I was like, do I need to renounce to my way of life? And do I need to renounce to my values that I had before the trail just so that I can do the trail? And that's when I thought about doing it waste-free and looking into buying my food in bulk and getting compostable bags and stuff that would make me avoid all this waste.
Well, first of all, that's awesome that you were able to avoid that much waste. I mean, like you said, you did end up having to create some waste.
Yes.
But I think that it's a really good example because you put a lot of work in ahead of time, like preparing for the trail, and even tried to find different shoes.
Yeah.
But then you went for the shoes that worked best for you so you could still be comfortable on the trail, and you didn't omit the painkillers so you could still be comfortable. So
yeah,
I like that as an example because it kind of demonstrates that you can't really be perfect, but also you can still do a lot.
Exactly.
If you go back to one of my earlier episodes, we do a waste audit and we talk about food packaging. So I feel like this is going to be somewhat similar to that, but I am kind of curious how you prepared food-wise, because in my head, when I think of like my backpacking waste and on previous trips, it is always the food packaging that you're talking about. In our personal lives, it's also mostly the food packaging, like you said. So I guess before we get to, or this is related to kind of a low waste backpacking list, how did you go about eliminating food packaging?
Mainly, I just bought in bulk. That's the main thing I did. Before I hit the trail, I looked into which stores in San Diego, which was my base, and it was also where I flew into, which stores had a good bulk section. And I also looked which towns along the trail had a good bulk store. And there's not a lot, there's like 2. So that's why I made San Diego my base. And when I got there, I kind of scouted all the stores that I had in my list to see which one or which ones I would be buying from. I found the cheapest option. And I also found, because the COVID regulations made a lot of bulk stores pre-package their food in small plastic containers. And at first I was defeated and I was like, no, I'm not going to be able to do this at all. But I talked to the managers from the stores and I kindly told them about my goal. And I told them that I was going to be buying from them every week or every month. And they allowed me to go in with my own containers and buy a lot of the food that I need in bulk. And they also allowed my friend to keep coming in regularly with his own containers so that he could buy in bulk for me. And then I found a brand of resealable home compostable bags. They're from a brand called BioBag. And this was just a game changer for me, because before finding these, I thought that I was going to have to carry heavy stasher bags or even glass or maybe mesh bags, but that meant that my food would perish or it would go everywhere, or that I would have to carry a lot of weight if I wanted to be waste-free. So I found these resealable bags. They're the same as Ziploc bags. They weigh the same, but they're home compostable. Now, I want to just explain why it's important that they're home compostable, because a lot of bioplastics that we find are not home compostable. They're industrially compostable. And that is an issue because not a lot of towns or cities have industrial compost facilities that can break down properly these materials, because you need a very high temperature and a very specific pH so that they can degrade properly. So when something is home compostable, it means that you can put it in your home compost and it's going to break down in a couple of months. So I messaged the people from BioBag just to make sure that they were home compostable, and they said yes. So these are the bags that I used. And I only used them because it's a long trail. If it were to be a shorter hike, then I don't use compostable plastics and I use my own containers or mesh bags. So in the end, I would get oats and couscous, dried fruits and nuts, pretzels, granola, dried peas, anything I could find that I knew that I could use and that I would crave. I bought it in bulk. It was so 90% of my food was in bulk. And then to complement, I carried granola bars from the only brand that I found that had home compostable packaging. It's called Live Bar. And they also cook with solar power, which is amazing. And I also carried dehydrated meals from a company called Fernway Food and another company called Evergreen Adventure Foods. They both make vegan, organic, and home compostable dehydrated meals. So that's how I would complement my food, and those would be my dinners every night. And I didn't get tired of them at all. And then I carried a bar of organic fair trade dark chocolate from a brand called Ultra Echo. And they also make low waste packaging, like cardboard with no plastification. And yeah, basically that's how I avoided food packaging waste.
Okay, yeah. So I'm glad that you went into such detail with how you went through that and kind of the foods that you brought along, because I was curious about how you effectively coordinated those food drops and or shopping while you were hiking, because like you're saying, there's only those 2 bulk stores along the trail. So did you shop at all while you were hiking, or did you rely solely on the food drops coming from those bulk stores?
I relied mainly on the food drops. So what we would do, my friend and I would be in constant communication. Whenever I had service in a town, I would tell him what I would need for the box that he hadn't prepared yet. So we would only do maybe like 2 weeks in advance. So I told him, okay, this next stretch is going to be 5 days. So I need this much granola, this many dried nuts, and et cetera, et cetera. And I would also order my dehydrated meals and my granola bars to his house. So I would tell him I need 5 granola bars, 6 dehydrated meals, and then he would make the box for me and I would give him the post office address and he would ship it to me. The only times where I did my own shopping and made my own boxes was when I was in Ashland in Oregon. I found a good co-op with a good bulk section. So I did my own shopping there. And I used my leftover compostable bags from the last stretch to do my own resupplies and ship it ahead. And I also did it in Bend in Oregon. I went to the Winco and I did a lot of shopping there. And also I left the trail in Snoqualmie Pass in Washington to go into Seattle and visit family. So that's where I also did the shopping for Northern Washington. I did it myself. So those were the only 3 times where I was able to shop for myself when I was actually on the trail.
Okay, that makes sense. Was coordinating that really hard?
Not really. So I prepared 4 boxes in advance before hitting the trail, and I did it with my friend. So he saw what I did, and I explained everything to him. He would also I would ask him for gear that I left at his house or maybe more shampoo. I pre-cut my own shampoo bars and put them in tinfoil. So I would tell them like, okay, I need more shampoo in this box, in this box. And I would just write down the number of the box, what I needed, and I would give it to him. And I was just mindful of his schedule. If he had to leave town, he would let me know. It wasn't that hard because he was living in California. The boxes would only take maybe like 5 days to reach me. And because we always did it 2 weeks in advance, it was never an issue.
Yeah, so it just sounds like there is a lot of pre-trip planning, which I'm sure everyone experiences, because I've heard of a lot of people doing those resupplies and having boxes mailed out. Basically, you would just supply those same things, but also zero waste.
I think zero waste, it's not that it's harder to plan. It's just maybe one extra layer that I don't think it's very tedious at all, but maybe that's because I'm used to living this way. But the one thing I will say is it can be less flexible because when you reach a town and you go to a grocery store, if you're not buying zero waste, then you can just get whatever you find and that you're craving at that moment. And if you're buying zero waste and you're relying on food drops, then you can only eat what you find in the bulk store. But I don't really mind that because I'm used to it. Yeah, that's the only thing that would change, I think, in my view.
Okay. What do you think was the biggest challenge for you then, doing it as a zero waste Thru-Hike?
The biggest challenge was because I didn't have any information of how this could work. Because before hitting the trail and when I was in my conundrum of, am I going to hike this even though it creates waste? Am I going to hike it zero waste? I was researching as much as I could and asking questions everywhere on every forum I could find of the PCT. I was asking people, how can I do this without creating waste? And I couldn't find any information. So I think the hardest was just like doing it first, I want to say. I didn't really have anything to grab onto. So it was very much trial and error, and it was an experiment for me. What I did is just anything that I knew I needed in terms of gear, toiletries, food, just anything involving the trail. I looked into how I could minimize my impact, just anything. So if it was gear, how can I minimize my impact there? If it was food, how can I do it there? If it was toiletry, so every single item of my list, I would look for the most sustainable option. And that was very time consuming, because if I needed to buy a backpacking bidet, then I would look at all the bidets and see how they're produced and see which one's the most sustainable one. And the same goes for my pee rag, and the same goes for just anything that I needed. I would look at all the options and then see which one's the most sustainable one. So that's what took me the most amount of time, just like kind of going against the grain and not having any frame of reference of how can I hike without waste and how can I hike a long trail without waste, because a lot of information that I did find was around shorter hikes where weight is not an issue. But when you are trying to be ultralight or very lightweight for a longer trail, then weight is an issue. So that's where convenience and plastics come in. So that was kind of hard. And also making sure that my compostable bags did get composted, because it doesn't really matter if you use a compostable plastic. If you're not going to compost it, it's going to end up in the landfill and it's not going to degrade properly. So when I would go into a town and I had my leftover bags from the last stretch, I had to look for either coffee shops or farms or people that composted in that town that were willing to take my bags from me. And I was actually very pleasantly surprised that I didn't have much of an issue along the trail, except for Northern California and Northern Washington. But then the people from Away Food, the people that I bought my dehydrated meals from, they messaged me and they told me that they could take my compostable bags for me. So I just mailed it to them and they composted them at their home. So that was kind of like the more logistical, it kind of took more time. I wouldn't say it was hard. It just took more time.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of things, whether it is for backpacking or just at home, you're kind of hitting it on the head right now, is that sometimes it just takes a little more time to discover the right options or the proper disposal, like you're explaining.
Exactly. And something like what you share in your Outdoor Minimalist account, I think is so valuable, because a lot of times we don't know how to identify if something is greenwashing or if something is actually sustainably produced. And that was also something that I had to deal around when I was shopping for my gear, when I was looking for things secondhand. Like, is this really secondhand, or they're just like, this is new, but they're saying that it's secondhand because it's on eBay? Stuff like that just takes more time. But it's not, I wouldn't say that it's harder to do. It's just a different way of thinking about your actions as a consumer.
Yeah, sometimes the process takes a little longer, but once you get used to it, it isn't really that difficult.
Yeah, exactly.
So I also follow you on Instagram, and I've noticed in some of your stories, you'll sometimes show like the grocer or the market that you go to. So how does shopping for bulk compare in Mexico or where you live versus what you noticed in the United States?
It's way more expensive in the United States. So in Mexico, it's really cheap to be zero waste in Mexico, actually, because we have local markets everywhere that it's just tradition that they have a lot of food in bulk. So seeds and nuts and legumes and different, like rice and a lot of things, spices come in bulk. And they do give it to you in plastic, but if you take your own bags to the market, then you're avoiding a lot of waste. So that's how I was used to shopping before. And then going into the US and looking for bulk options, it was more expensive in the more like specialized organic markets, I'd say. Like if you go to the big grocery stores that are organic and more towards catering, like towards that lifestyle, it can be more expensive. But I also did go to most of my bulk resupplies for the trail were from this grocery store in San Diego that wasn't expensive at all. And the bulk section was actually way cheaper than many other bulk stores that I scouted. So I think I did save a lot of money there. But yeah, I was surprised that living zero waste in the US, some shops are a bit more expensive than I was used to back home.
It is weirdly expensive, but I feel like depending on where you live, I have definitely lived in places in the United States where there are no bulk options at all, which I find strange. But if you live in a city that offers that, I do find sometimes it is cheaper than the one with packaging, pending, like you said, is it an organic one or not?
Yeah, if you go to a store that's like Winco, that they have a huge bulk store, because a lot of restaurants, they stock up there, so it's cheaper. If you go to those stores, like the big ones, then you can find way cheaper options in bulk than if you go to an organic. But also buying organic has its benefits, so it depends on what you're looking for.
Yeah, for sure. I love Winco.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about how hiking a long distance trail like the PCT, your packing list was a little bit different than it would be for a short hike.
Mm-hmm.
So we can focus just on the food packaging if you want to do that, but you can talk maybe about other types of gear. But how would you prepare for a zero waste shorter, like say a weekend trip versus how you prepared for the PCT?
Well, for a weekend trip, because I'm not so worried about weight, then I would usually I take fresh fruits, fresh vegetables with me because I know they're not going to perish. I'm going to eat them. I take glass jars with my own trail mix. And I take my own containers, maybe Tupperware. I can take mesh bags with trail mix or mesh bags with like smaller fruit items. So I take whatever I use in my everyday life and I just put it on my backpack and I'm not worried about the weight. I usually carry a metal water bottle with me. I don't like to use plastic. In general, even if it's reusable, I tend to avoid using plastic. So I carry like a big metal bottle and I carry my own cutlery and I carry my own cloth, napkin, stuff like that. But for a through hike, because that's very heavy, then the difference was that for example, my water bottles were reusable plastic, collapsible water bottles from this brand called Knock or Knock. I'm not sure how that's pronounced, but I found those because I saw that a lot of through hikers use plastic bottles, especially the smart water bottles. I don't know why. It's like a cult thing maybe, but I wanted to avoid those without having to carry heavy, hard plastic. So I found these collapsible bottles and those are the ones that I used. I also had a silicone bag that I would cold soak my oats in. Yeah, I didn't carry like my own napkin and my own cutlery. I just had one wooden spoon and that's it. And the other things don't differ. In terms of gear, I just have what I own. I usually like to tell people that the most sustainable piece of gear is the gear that already exists, like the one that you already have, or the one that a friend has, or the one that someone on Reddit or on eBay has. So just avoiding buying something new just because you don't have it or you think you need it. So for my through hike, I did need a lot of gear that I didn't have before. So I borrowed some and mainly I looked for used gear on forums and websites. And that's what I had. So most of my gear for the trail was purchased used. And if I couldn't buy it used, then I would look for the most sustainable option again and high quality materials so that it would stand the test of time and I would use it a lot of times. And it was like a minimal amount of gear that I had to actually buy new that wasn't produced in a more sustainable way than their competition.
Yeah, I love that the most sustainable piece of gear is the one that already exists.
Yeah.
That's a great way to remember.
Yeah.
And it is Canuck.
Okay.
Which if people are interested in learning more about that brand, I do have an episode with them. So you can...
Yeah, I love them.
Yeah, they have some great stuff.
Yeah. Oh, and I forgot to mention, I always carry, either if it's a day hike or a through hike, I carry like sunscreen that's in zero waste packaging and toothpaste tabs. And I usually don't carry deodorant for a longer trail. Like the through hike, I didn't carry deodorant, but for a weekend hike, I do carry the deodorant that I make at home. And I make sure that all the things that I take in my toiletry kit come in zero waste packaging because these are such small items that we can lose very easily. And it did happen to me along the PCT that I did lose my sunscreen stick that came in a cardboard tube, and it was made from natural oils and natural minerals. So when I lost it, I was like, oh no, I lost my sunscreen, but I wasn't like, oh my God, I just polluted the trail. It just makes me feel at ease when I carry things that I know that if I accidentally drop them, because we are all human and we drop things and we leave things behind, if I drop it, it's not going to stay there for 300 years, polluting the environment.
Yeah, I think that's an important distinction, that you're not just focusing on the packaging, which the packaging is important, but also looking at the ingredients.
Yeah.
Because yes, if you do lose it, then it will likely pollute that area.
Exactly.
So that's a great piece of advice.
I think for me, it's just the whole reason why I did the trail like I did and why I try to recreate outdoors in a zero waste way is because I know that we all love being outside and we all love nature and we love hiking in it and swimming in the ocean and just being outside, but we shouldn't be damaging it in the process. Like if you're wearing sunscreen that is toxic and you go into the ocean, then you're damaging that same ocean that you came to enjoy. It's the same for the trail. If you're hiking the trail, but you're producing waste along the way, even if you're not dropping that waste on the trail, which a lot of people do drop things on the way. And I did find a lot of food wrappers on the trail that I would pick up as I was hiking because you just drop it accidentally. Even if you don't drop it on the trail and you leave it in a trash can in the next town, it's still gonna impact the environment that's around the trail that you love and the environment in like the planet that we love. So if we can just reduce the impact, that'd be great.
So you've already shared a lot of great information and tips and kind of how to start this journey. But if you were to give someone that's listening that maybe wants to start to integrate this lifestyle into their backpacking, whether it is a short weekend trip, a week-long trip, or a distance hike, where would be the place you recommend they start?
Because I think food waste is the hugest chunk of where waste is created on a backpacking trip, I'd say focus there. And be prepared. That's the main thing for reducing your waste, is just be prepared beforehand. So if you know that you're going to be on a 3-day trip, know how much food you need and see if you can make your own food beforehand. If you have the time and you have the means, then see if you can make your own snacks. If you can buy in bulk with your own bags to avoid plastic waste and then repackage it in a smaller container that you have at home. Carry your own bottle. Carry something that you already own, I would say. You don't need to buy a lot of new things just because you want to start living a zero waste lifestyle. But if you can avoid using plastics in general, that's better, because then if you lose something, then it's not going to pollute the environment. But yeah, I would say focus on food waste. That's the biggest thing. And then once you tackle food waste, then you can go into your toiletry kit and see which things you can switch out for zero waste packaging, because also carrying like the small toothpaste tubes and the small shampoo bottle and the small, like it's small plastic everything that just piles up and creates a lot of waste worldwide. So if you can avoid that too, that's like the next step, I would say.
Yeah, I like that you're kind of focusing on like an incremental progression through things. You don't have to overhaul everything right away. Start to build up to it.
Oh, yeah, no, you'd go crazy.
Yes. So if people want to follow along with your zero waste journey, where can people find you?
So I'm on Instagram as WasteFreePCT. That's where I was sharing my hike, but I keep sharing tips and ways to reduce your impact when you're recreating outdoors. So that's kind of like the turn that my account is taking. So if this resonates with you and you want to learn more about how to reduce your waste outside, then I'm there to help.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat, Anna. I learned a lot, and
oh no, thank you, Meg.
It was a very inspiring discussion.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. And if you like what you hear, let me know. Leave a review and be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. New content has begun to appear on the Outdoor Minimalist Patreon. Head over to theoutdoorminimalist.com for more information about our listener support and patron exclusives. You can still find me on Instagram at outdoor.minimalist.book. Follow there for daily updates. other educational resources, and to help build an outdoor community with a shared goal to create a better outdoor space as we recreate.